Hello everyone, this is Ukraine today. Sex scandal in the Kremlin. Putin and his elderly pervert friends regularly use the paid services of ladies of the night. Sensational investigation. The head of the Kremlin and at the same time, the Russian tsar is afraid of a coup. Who among Putin's closest circle could stab him in the back? Occupiers, run! The GUR is at work. Kyrylo Budanov in Pokrovsk. Ukrainian special forces were sent to repel the Russian offensive. Exclusive footage. The ridiculous Lukashenko has imagined himself as great and terrible and has gone off the rails, threatening the West with a nuclear nutcracker. Blackout in the Moscow suburbs. This game can be played by two. Donald Trump, despite Orbán's pleas, ordered him to give up Russian blood oil. We'll talk about this next. My name is Oreshnik and we're getting started. But before that, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And be sure to let us know in the comments where you're watching us from. And do your fellow citizens support Ukraine in its fight against the Russian occupiers? This is very important to us. General Kyrylo Budanov entered Pokrovsk. The Main Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine is conducting a special operation at the hottest spot on the Russian-Ukrainian front. The first to report the start of the operation was journalist and economist Oliver Carroll. He published a video showing the landing of special forces by helicopter in the Pokrovsk area. These areas are under the control of the Russian occupiers. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War claim that Ukrainian defense forces have carried out successful counterattacks on the northern outskirts of the city. According to Ukrainian media, the operation is being conducted in the industrial zone area. This is a very difficult area, and the occupiers are making it a key focus from a logistics standpoint. It is impossible to determine a time frame for the completion of the operation. The operation is ongoing. Ukrainian heroes are fighting under extremely difficult conditions. Hundreds of drones are flying over the city. By the way, Russian generals have already rushed to spread lies about the supposed destruction of the landing force. They triumphantly reported the elimination of all 11 people who landed from the helicopter. As always, this does not correspond to reality. According to Ukrainian military sources, the operation under the command of Kyrylo Budanov is ongoing. Next is a direct quote. This information is just as fabricated as Gerasimov's report to Putin a few days ago that Pokrovsk was surrounded. What else is happening now on the front and around it is in our review.
A Ukrainian crew of a German Leopard tank crushes a Russian FPV drone called ZH-Dun with a skid on the road. Apparently, its operator missed the moment when he could have launched the deadly bird into the sky. Right now, the situation in the Pokrovsk-Mirnorad direction is very difficult, if not critical. Almost half of all clashes on the front line are happening precisely in the Pokrovsk direction. Russian channels are reporting that the city is effectively encircled. The Ukrainian armed forces have no chance, but the occupying forces might make a gesture of goodwill.
The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has received an order from the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Federation to ensure unhindered passage for foreign journalists, including Ukrainian ones, when they request access from the command of the Ukrainian armed forces to visit areas where Ukrainian troops are encircled in Krasnoarmysk, Dmitrov, and Kupiansk. The Russian command is prepared, if necessary, to cease hostilities for 5 to 6 hours in these areas, and also to provide corridors for the unhindered entry and exit of groups of foreign media representatives, including Ukrainian ones, provided that safety is guaranteed for both journalists and Russian military personnel.
In order to supposedly show the dire situation in the USSR, the Kremlin wants to provide a corridor for Western journalists.
This is an attempt to wage psychological and media warfare, to draw attention to the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces are in a bad situation, and to do so in the way Putin wants, with excessive dramatization.
According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, there is no talk of any encirclement. Fighting is already taking place on the outskirts of both Mirnorad and Pokrovsk. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that around 170,000 Russian soldiers are concentrated near Pokrovsk. At the same time, the supply of ammunition and provisions to the Ukrainian army is being carried out systematically. All the talk about encirclement is just Russian disinformation.
There is no blockade of our defense forces by the enemy in Pokrovsk. These are merely statements of Russian propaganda that do not correspond to reality. The enemy's occupying army is indeed increasing pressure in the Pokrovsk direction, particularly in the area of the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration. The situation in Pokrovsk remains difficult and dynamic. Separate groups of enemy infantry are infiltrating Pokrovsk and attempting to move and concentrate within this settlement. General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
There is, generally speaking, no real prospect of encirclement of the Ukrainian forces defending Pokrovsk, because if the situation takes a particularly unfavorable turn, these troops can withdraw and evacuate to the north. Supplies ongoing. What does this mean? It means that during the supply of these convoys, these could be trucks or some other means of transportation maybe, less conspicuous than large trucks. But nevertheless, the losses, the number of people in these convoys could be much greater than in other similar cases, actually. But nonetheless, supply is ongoing.
Despite the difficult situation, even if the USSR has to leave Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, the occupying forces will lose a huge amount of equipment and personnel. And at the same time, this will not change the overall picture along the front line. This is also confirmed by the intelligence services of European countries.
Of course, it is also clear that sooner or later, Ukraine will have to withdraw its units from the Pokrovsk district. But as I mentioned earlier, the capture of the Pokrovsk district by Russian forces will not determine the overall situation in Ukraine. Ants Kiviselg, head of the intelligence center of the Estonian Defense Forces.
Putin claimed that Pokrovsk would be under the control of the Russian army. And even a year ago, in reality, the Kremlin's ambitions are still unfulfilled.
Russian generals failed to deliver on their promise to Putin to break the Ukrainian front by November. Reuters reports this, citing sources. According to the agency, at the beginning of August, the general staff assured the dictator that the Ukrainian defensive line would collapse within the next 2 to 3 months. But since the so-called summer offensive by the occupiers, they have managed to capture only 0.4% of Ukrainian territory. At this rate, it would take Russia more than 100 years to fully seize the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions, to strike Western countries with nuclear weapons. Such a sharp threat was voiced by Alexander Lukashenko. The brief friendship between Trump and the two-faced Luka is over. The Belarusian dictator, having received nuclear warheads, suddenly became emboldened, and he decisively sent the entire West and the Trump administration packing.
We'll let you in on a secret. We're negotiating with the Americans. These negotiations are proceeding with varying degrees of difficulty. And literally the very next day, on that same day, after the night when those balloons flew, the Americans sent us a letter saying that the Belarusians were to blame for what happened. And that the authorities and Lukashenko himself must immediately apologize to Lithuania and do so publicly. Well, fuck you and so on. There will be something for it. I told you that we will apologize. But if we are to blame, what should I apologize for?
To publicly send Trump away is, to put it mildly, brazen. I haven't allowed myself to do this even in eternity, drunk Medvedev. But having received a hazelnut that could carry a nuclear charge, Lukashenko clearly felt like Caesar.
Hazelnut, a terrible weapon. It will go on combat duty in December. For what? I want them to understand that we can go crazy if things get bad. Let's sit down with Putin, make a decision, and go for it.
I don't know about the West, but this fantasist definitely didn't scare Ukraine. We're already used to it. Something tells me that the combat potential of the hazelnut is about on par with other outstanding achievements of Russian technology, which also date back to the Soviet Union. And what do you think? Will the Belarusian Caesar answer for his words? Especially after such threats directed personally at Trump and the entire West. Write your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like the video and be sure to mention where you're watching us from. And how many of your fellow countrymen support the Ukrainian people in their fight against the Russian occupiers? Meanwhile, while Lukashenko is provoking the Baltic countries and arguing with the Americans, Finland has scared Putin. Helsinki will hold large-scale military exercises involving about 15,000 servicemen, which will take place from November to December in regions including those bordering Russia. And in Russia, there is real panic about this. In particular, the authorities in Karelia are forming people's militias to assist border guards on the border with Finland. This was announced by the head of the Republic, Artur Parfenchikov. Our journalists know all the details.
Acting proactively. Finland is deploying 15,000 troops to the border with Russia. The Finns are preparing for the largest series of military exercises this year. Conscripts, reservists, career military personnel, as well as units from allied countries Sweden and the United Kingdom will take part in them. As reported by the country's ground forces, the purpose of the maneuvers is to test the army's readiness to defend the state and to strengthen cooperation with NATO allies.
This is a response by the NATO bloc to aggressive actions from the occupying country. On the territory of the occupier country directly near Finland's borders, there is currently intensive engineering construction of new military bases by the occupier's army. This refers to Petrozavodsk, Kandalaksha and other settlements on the territory of the Russian Federation, which indicate the redeployment of Russian army units directly near the borders of Finland.
One of the largest episodes will be the Livolays Sentry exercise, which will take place in southern Finland from November 27th to December 4th. About 7,000 participants will be involved in it.
The Russian Federation has constantly made it clear to Finland what threat looms over this country. Moreover, there has been a constant element of military political pressure on Finland with the aim, accordingly, of maintaining its so-called neutral status. There is not the slightest reason to say that after the occupation of Finnish lands, friendly, good neighborly relations were established. The Russian military presence near Finland's borders was constantly increasing.
In the spring of 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This provoked a sharp reaction from Russia, worsening bilateral relations. In addition, Finland imposed sanctions against Russia and refused to grant asylum to Russians fleeing mobilization. After that, Putin's lackeys began blaming the Finns for every sin at every opportunity. For example, in September, former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev decided that Finland was preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO, under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a springboard for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II, claiming that at the time they paid too little thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
This is precisely an element of diplomatic and military pressure on Finland. Moreover, similar statements are being made not only regarding Finland but also accordingly regarding Sweden, specifically about the island of Gotland, and likewise regarding Poland.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. He stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything necessary for that. Medvedev had previously spoken about this as well.
We cannot ignore the important fact that Finland is currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance, also known as NATO. This status predetermines and shapes changes in our military approaches, in how we equip the border and respond to possible unfriendly acts.
The political and military leaders of Finland are doing everything they can to emphasize that an attack by Russia would be an act of suicidal madness. Nevertheless, the authorities in Karelia are strengthening the security of the border with Finland with the help of people's militias.
The Russian Federation is demonstrating its readiness for a direct confrontation with the NATO bloc, and accordingly the first states that will be... These are the areas under the attention of the occupying country's army. These accordingly are Finland and the Baltic states. Therefore the risks are quite high. This is also evidenced by the formation of new military units in the Leningrad military district and accordingly the deployment of military infrastructure directly near the borders with Finland.
Earlier it became known that Finland had offered NATO to establish a new military base on its territory. Helsinki could become a base for large NATO reconnaissance drones.
The drone forces set a new record in October. According to data published by SBS Commander Magyar, last month Ukrainian drone operators eliminated more than 8,000 Russian occupiers. This is approximately every third occupier eliminated at the front in October. More than 26,500 enemy targets were also destroyed or partially damaged. Enemy targets. This is more than 20% higher compared to September. A blackout is approaching Moscow. For the first time, residents of the Moscow region experienced the hardships of emergency power outages and life without electricity. At night, during a massive attack by Ukrainian drones, the city of Zhukovsky lost power. In addition to drones, electricity is being cut off for Russians by Ukrainian-made missiles. The Ukrainian Navy stated that the strike on the Oryol thermal power plant and the Novobryanskaya electrical substation, which led to a partial blackout in Russian cities, was carried out using Ukrainian Neptune cruise missiles. Putin is in a panic, afraid of a coup in the Kremlin and of being removed from power. And it should be noted that the bunker dweller now has many new reasons for this fear. Who exactly is Putin so afraid of? The details are in our report.
For almost a quarter of a century, Vladimir Putin has been building a system of personal power in Russia, a totalitarian state where any dissent is punished with fear, the cement of the regime. But today this monolith is starting to crack. The Russian dictator is in a panic, afraid of losing his grip on Russia. As the Telegraph writes, the bunker dweller is meticulously guarding his regime against any threats. Recently, the FSB accused Mikhail Khodorkovsky and 22 other members of the Russian anti-war committee of preparing a coup d'etat. According to the intelligence service, the organization is allegedly planning a violent seizure of power and the overthrow of the constitutional order.
This tells us that the Kremlin is paranoid. Putin is looking for enemies in an attempt to strengthen his regime. John Herbst, Senior Director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council and former US Ambassador to Ukraine.
After spending 10 years in a Siberian prison, Khodorkovsky was released in 2013 and fled to Europe, where he founded the Anti-War Committee in 2022. In an interview with The Telegraph, he stated that the FSB's accusation reflects the Kremlin's fear of the future and the issue of power transfer.
What do we have in Russia? A prime minister whom no one elected but whom Putin appointed. Courts appointed by Putin. A parliament whose seats were filled as a result of rigged elections and whose legitimacy no one believes in. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Russian entrepreneur and publicist.
They couldn't care less about the liberals who fled after being castrated. They're not afraid at all. They're not afraid of each other. Of the same predators, those who walk around you, smile at you every day, and swear loyalty to your face. These are the ones who can, and Putin knows this perfectly well. And the Medvedev-Prigozhin incident, even if it was staged, clearly showed that no one will defend him. Neither the National Guard, nor the police, nor the rank and file, nor the generals. No one cares, no one gives a damn. And that's why Putin is afraid and...
Indeed, fear becomes the key word. The dictator is cornered, and the economic situation only heightens the anxiety. Russia's Minister of Economy, Maxim Reshetnikov, admitted that the country is on the verge of recession. The banking system is suffocating under the debts of defense enterprises. According to Harvard analyst Craig Kennedy, $190 billion in loans have been issued to defense industry companies without guarantees. And now this bubble could burst at any moment. Moreover, Ukrainian drones have destroyed more than half of Russia's oil refineries, forcing fuel into huge lines. There are fuel shortages at gas stations. And new sanctions from across the ocean have only intensified the blow. Donald Trump imposed the most painful restrictions since the start of the war. The giants Rosneft and Lukoil have come under fire. Now China and India are cutting back on purchases of Russian oil. Almost 3 million barrels per day are at risk. And with them, half of the Kremlin's revenues. But Putin fears not only internal threats but also external ones. The dictator is pulling more and more air defense systems to the Kremlin. There are already 5 layers of defense around the capital. Panzer S-300 and S-400 systems are being brought in from all regions.
Donald Trump has forbidden Viktor Orbán from buying Russian oil. Hungary is preparing for a gasoline shortage due to the sanctions. The day before, Donald Trump confirmed that his close friend Viktor Orbán tried to negotiate a personal exemption, but he refused him. On November 8th, Orbán will meet with Trump to try once again to beg for a postponement. But it seems that even the Hungarian Prime Minister himself does not believe in his own chances. That is why his government has prepared amendments to the law on the storage of imported oil and petroleum products so that in case of disruptions, special reserve gas stations can be used to supply critically important service consumers. These changes will come into effect on January 1st of next year. Sex scandal in the Kremlin. Putin and his elderly perverted friends regularly use the paid services of elite prostitutes. Don't believe it? See for yourself. A journalistic investigation.
The double standard of family values in Putin's Russia. That's only when they're in front of the microphone, under the spotlight. In front of the cameras of their tame propagandists, the Kremlin's master and his entourage preach about high morals.
Family values for us, for Russia and its citizens, through all challenges, remain truly steadfast.
I would like to express my gratitude to you on behalf of the Russian Orthodox Church, and personally, for your unwavering attention to the spiritual life of the people.
We don't need alien values imposed on us. You've destroyed your own values. Let's see how that turns out.
Traditional family values are extremely important and cherished by all of Russian society.
But off camera, it's a completely different story. In the best traditions of the KGB. They set up honey traps for their enemies. Meanwhile, they themselves have fun with women of low social responsibility. In other words, escorts. And we can only guess at the scale and methods preferred by these aging perverts.
I'm doing everything so that, for me, I love you.
Thank you, thank you.
Amazingly, the country's chief moralist came to power through a high-profile sex scandal in the 90s. At that time, Vladimir Putin was investigating the case of Prosecutor General Yuri Skuratov. Footage of him with 2 escorts was broadcast on the main national news channel in this vast country. The authors of the book Tsar in Person claim that the revenge against the law enforcement officer who dared to investigate theft in the Kremlin was orchestrated by a young FSB colonel.
The thing is, it was Yeltsin himself who was behind the attack on Skuratov. And the person appointed to carry out this dirty mission was another visitor to the presidential chamber. FSB Director Vladimir Putin. At the beginning of 1999, the parliament controlled by the family refused to dismiss Skuratov. So they brought in Putin and the women who entertained a man resembling the prosecutor general in a safe house in the center of Moscow.
Today, FSB Director Vladimir Putin told journalists that the scandalous videotape showing a man resembling Skuratov is authentic. In other words, it really does show the prosecutor general.
My opinion on this matter is well known. It matches the opinion of the president and the prime minister of the country. Yuri Ilyich must resign.
This case, according to Navalny's team, became the trigger. The KGB practice from the Cold War era of setting up honey traps, in other words, planting women with the right people, began to be actively used by Russian officials against their own opponents within the country. I
realized that I'd gotten caught in that very honey trap I'd only ever heard about in movies before. And
Limonov, I think, actually benefited at 67 from being with a young woman.
Meanwhile, Putin's own inner circle, and this is despite the fact that the real lives of the oligarchs, secretly locked away, are not averse to having fun with prostitutes. And the younger they are, the better. Much to the delight of Russian investigative journalists, some of them, for example, Nastya Rybka, even wrote an entire book about her escapades. And thanks to the numerous videos she published, Navalny, who was still alive at the time, was able to determine when, where, and with whom the girl and her friends were having fun. This revealed not only the connection between the escorts and Putin's favorite oligarch Deripaska, but also with Sergei Eduardovich.
This is Sergei Eduardovich Prikodko, Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation. Prikodko is not widely known, but he's an extremely influential Russian official who has spent his entire life working in public service. In the late 1990s, he worked as deputy head of the presidential administration. At that time, by the way, Putin was the first deputy head. He was an advisor to President Yeltsin, then to President Putin, and later to President Medvedev. After that, and up to the present day, he has headed the government staff and serves as Medvedev's deputy. Prikodko is considered a specialist in international relations and is regarded as perhaps the most influential official in this field. Not Lavrov, but Prikodko specifically.
Oh, by the way, it was also Rybka who wrote in her book that Sergei Eduardovich outranks Deripaska.
Ruslan backs down before him, never argues with him, listens to him, and Papa is the only one Ruslan never jokes about. Never. Who is this person? Who could the billionaire be afraid of?
It was Papa who was the border guard at the very beginning. The border guard is in charge of the billionaire, and the billionaire can't get a word in when Papa brazenly hits on his woman. What is this? I'm puzzled. Papa disappeared back on the deck. Such a mysterious figure. It seems that Papa was taken away before the yacht even docked at the shore. As I understood it, he couldn't even go ashore with Ruslan, for some strange reason.
Well, after this story, with all its real details, shook up the media, the girl admitted that Prikodko wasn't alone in bed with just one escort girl.
She wanted something from Prikodko, and she understood that basically she needed to get it through sleeping with him. Well, honestly, that's what all the girls in Moscow do. They're there to keep getting invited to the movies.
So was it only Ksyusha who dared to go for Prikodko?
Why only Ksyusha? Let's put it this way. Everyone understands that people of a certain status and means, even if you don't know who they are. Well, I kind of regret that I didn't sleep with Prikodko, honestly.
But the departure from traditional values, even though back then in Russia people weren't making such a fuss about them, didn't affect either the presidential administration official or the oligarch in any way. Moreover, not so long ago, journalists uncovered yet another of Deripaska's preferences: intimacy with underage virgins. And since there weren't many of those, the pimps resorted to tricks.
They regularly performed a procedure they called refueling. The girls, including schoolgirls, and especially Liza Popova, who was the main figure in the case, were also given it. It was either a packet or a special syringe that they would insert into the vagina before sex, and at the moment of contact with the man, there was a red liquid that would leak onto the sheets. And the girl would pretend that she was in pain. She was taught what to say. The scouts, including Taitova, this is all in the testimonies in the case materials, and the victims also told us about this, that they were taught to pretend to be virgins, to show blood. Sometimes they were also given special substances, pills or burnt alum, which were also inserted into the vagina. They narrow it to imitate virginity. This is quite a painful procedure. There are many conversations in the case files where the girls talk, complain to the pimp that it hurts, how bad they feel, and they're told, just endure it, it'll pass, it's nothing to worry about.
Deripaska's perversion, which borders on the criminal code, is connected with prostitutes. Employed at Rosneft, the presence of elite prostitutes at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. The immorality of the Russian elite is seeping out from every crack. Yet at the same time, without batting an eye, they convince Russians that the most important thing is upholding traditional family values.
That's all I have for now. Thank you for your attention. Once again, let me remind you to like and subscribe to our channel, and be sure to let us know in the comments where you're watching us from, and whether your fellow countrymen support Ukraine in its fight against the Russian occupiers, your compatriots. This is very important to us. Until next.
In both difficult and hopeful times, the phrase "Glory to Ukraine" has stood as a symbol of unity and strength for the Ukrainian people.